If you were given the choice between, I'll give you 1,000 people who will come every Sunday to your church. And when you're just starting out, that sounds amazing.
Right.
Again, 1,000 people
Right.
will come every Sunday to your church. They'll listen to you. They'll really like you. They'll support you. They'll give money to your church. But you'll never have more than 100 of those people engaged in mission. That's option one. Or I'm giving you option two, and you have to pick one. You can't have both. You can't have a hybrid, Or option two, right now, I will give you 1,000 people engaged in mission, but you'll never be able to get more than 100 of them in a row at the same time. Which would you choose?
So, Brian, you've been going at this quite a while with microchurch. And I know that this almost sounds like, yeah, well, that's the logical place to begin, but it really is. For people that don't know, how do you define microchurch?
I think it's some kind of search for what could be called like the ecclesial minimum, or the minimum viable product, which is the church, So obviously if you said, do you need a building to be the church? Probably not. Do you need an offering to be the church?
Right.
You don't. And so you can kind of peel back the cultural layers of when I think the word church, what am I thinking of? A marquee, a pastor, a group of leaders, whatever. If you really peel all that back and think if all of that was gone, but I was left with just these elements, would that still be the church? What is its very core minimum?
The irreducible
minimum of the church. That doesn't mean you couldn't have more. It doesn't mean you don't want more complexity. But to sort of acknowledge what is that, and everybody has their minimum. Maybe yours is 4 things, 3 things, 2 things, whatever, 9 things. But everybody has their irreducible minimum. So for us, it was the conclusion we sort of came to. And I don't think we're alone. There's a lot of people that would find similar language of, we would say, worship, kind of the alignment to Jesus as Lord. Community, like real, genuine relationships between people. Shared life, love, whatever. And then mission, somehow working to expand the boundaries of the kingdom of God for good, for justice, for faithlessness, the good news of the kingdom being brought to the world where it is not, light into darkness. So when our conclusion was when those 3 things are happening in the same place at the same time, you're looking at the church.
Yeah.
So that changes a lot. That changes a lot about what we have called something church, or what we think the church could be. Because then you start to, like almost like a softball team could be the church. A church could mean a laundromat. A church could be a break room in a law firm. A church could be under a tree in a village or something. So I think that question of the simplest version of the church, the humblest version of the church, which might be meaningful in our conversation today. It's like, what's the version of the church which is like the least likely to offend the founder's intent? You know what I mean? For its heart to be.
Right, and still have the components that really
still be the church.
Yeah, cause it to run on all cylinders.
Yeah. So again, I wouldn't say that having a building or having complex programs or staff or anything like that is good or bad. I suppose it's just
it can be neutral.
It's not necessary to be the church,
right?
And when you take some of that stuff away, Lance, I just think what we're left with is actually God is his church is in a lot of places we didn't think it was before. We weren't noticing necessarily. And we're not paying attention to the simple kind of granular beauty of the people of God trying to be the people of God everywhere they are.
Yeah. I remember, and I know you'll remember this, in a lot of the different surveys that some of the big surveying companies and some of the big Christian surveying and polling companies do, for a long time, they didn't count microchurch or house church. It's like, which, I mean, that's a bit offensive, to say the least. I think it would definitely be offensive to Jesus. And the other thing is, it's like the early church wouldn't have counted in these polls, would it?
I think something like 70% of church. I don't know. It's the majority of churches, both in America, in the world, and in our time, and in all time, have been less than 100 people. So what is the church? Like, statistically speaking, if you were to sort of try to anthropologically define the church or a church, a local church, you'd have to say it would be something quite small.
Yeah.
So it's a very new phenomenon, this kind of consolidation of, and actually when we look at megachurches, what I see when I look at a megachurch is actually hundreds of smaller churches. It's just one umbrella or one control system or one leadership mechanism over it all.
Right.
One brand,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
Which maybe there's value in that. Maybe there's times in which that shared brand adds value to those smaller things. But actually recognizing you're not just one church.
Yeah.
There's many little communities that are representing Jesus in lots of different places. So I think that's also part of it too. It's almost like unlocking our mind and our imagination to see God at work in lots of different places. And then some of obviously the breakdowns or failures or I don't know, moral turpitude.
Yeah, the crisis, the scandals.
It's come under the weight of this kind of obsession with big. With if God's really moving, if something good is happening, you're getting bigger.
Yeah.
And the idea that like bigger must be better.
Yeah. And you and I both, I mean, we've spent so many time at so many conferences, heard so many talks. Healthy things grow. Well, okay. Unhealthy things grow too. You ever heard of obesity? You ever heard of a tumor? Right? You ever seen a bloated dead cow?
But even what is growth? I mean, growth, if you think biologically, you're talking about you throwing off cells, you're giving things away. There's a releasing. I mean, kids, if you're kid, I mean, to see your kids grow is to also let them go and to release them.
So true.
As agents of their own lives and whatever. So
exactly.
But that question of like the Goldilocks zone or whatever, you know. This is a weird thing, and I know you like these kind of things, but like, why do we never ask that question? It's like we've done almost no study, no research on what the best size of a church is.
Yeah. And
part of the reason why I think is because we have this assumption that you just want it to be bigger. So, like a church of 500 is better than a church of 100. The church of 1,000 is better.
Yes, it's almost unquestioned.
It's totally unquestioned.
Yeah.
Because if you thought, well, what's the optimum kind of perfect size church, we'd be trying to figure that out. We'd be trying to find the number that, and I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is, but my hunch is it's probably like 75 people or something. It's like it's small enough that you know everybody, but there's some weak ties. Networks are formed. People can solve each other's problems, you know. But it isn't this other thing, this sort of bigger thing, which I think, you know, obviously creates a top-heavy potential.
And very expensive.
And very expensive. and per dollar, maybe not super effective.
Yeah. And of course, we're not here, and you and I mean, I know you're not here to beat up on the big church or whatever. That's not the issue that we're even talking about here. But especially as Americans, we love bigger and better. And I'm a Texan, so
you do it big.
Everything's got to be bigger and better, right? And then you shrink wrap it, and then you sell it to everybody else, right? And we've seen so much of that, man. We've seen a lot of that. So once again, and you know this because I know you get inquiries all the time from people. A lot of people just have no idea what microchurch is. So what, like Tampa Underground? So like if I was to become a part of a typical one of the microchurch elements within Tampa Underground, what would that rhythm look like? What would I become part of?
I think one way in which the underground is slightly different from maybe some of our cousins in the small church movement or the sort of networked, decentralized church stuff is we're really big on people discerning and obeying some call into mission. So actually, there is no entry point to the underground other than that. So it's you or a group of people feeling like, I just really feel called to the kids in my neighborhood, or I really feel called to single moms, or I really just feel called to the healthcare industry because I work in that, or whatever. Some justice issue or some place where I see great unbelief.
So this would be what anthropologists or sociologists would call the organizing principle.
The organizing principle, yes.
Would be mission.
That's
you
right.
start with mission.
Yes. And then we organize around that organization. So I think the organizing principle of the underground would be to serve people doing that. So to serve people who are trying to form little communities to reach or love or show compassion or bring good news into those places. So you got to know who you're sent to.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then who you're going to go with. So that's the community component. So sense of mission, who is my community? And then under the kind of leadership and lordship of Jesus, you're just trying to serve those people. You're trying to bring truth, goodness, or beauty into that space. And then the underground is really just like, how do we network those things together? And we wanted to just call those things churches. So I think a lot of people would have those in big churches, and they call them ministries or outreaches or something like that. We just wanted to say, because of our minimum ecclesiology, we want to say, actually, that is the church too. So then you can start saying, well, okay, well then who's leading those? Well, I think maybe our conviction is, from a New Testament lens, those would be elders. And then there's a certain expectation for their conduct and their character. And then those become related to each other in some sort of college of elders or some sort of, interrelated accountability and covenant with each other to do right by each other, by the kingdom, whatever. So that's really the underground. The underground is an attempt to serve people who are called or sent to something, and to give them a bigger family, a bigger networked family.
Yeah. And so then the rhythm within that doesn't
be totally different. So that,
it could. There's so there's a diversity, right? But those are once again kind of the starting points and the high points. These are our, and I know y'all don't have a ton of check boxes, but these are pretty solid. Like, no, if you're not this, you're not what we're doing. And so then there is a ongoing rhythm of fellowship, gathering, typical.
It would be for each of them to define.
Okay.
So in other words, we would want to encourage each of these microchurches to have clarity on what their kind of discipleship pathway is. How do people come to faith, or how do they come to know Jesus or grow in Christ? And honestly, we see ourselves as novices in all of those unique contexts or callings. So we would never want to sort of superimpose an approach, only to ask the right questions and to say, like, how does a person come to faith in your thing, or how does a person grow, or how does a person become accountable or something? So we try to ask the right questions that we think are universal. But each context, man, we got to respect. I mean, that sort of missionary mentality, which is that's the ilk we come from. And missiology, or people that think in missionary terms, have a high respect for context and the culture you enter into. Sometimes because you're not from that.
Right.
And so you have to listen to it, you have to respect it. And so as kind of network servants, people that are trying to serve lots of different kinds of ministries or lots of different kinds of microchurches, we can't presume to know what the rhythms should be, or the cadences should be.
Right.
But you should have some.
Sure.
There's got to be gathering points. There's got to be points of worship and devotion and learning and welcome.
Right.
There's got to be a front door where people are able to come in. There's got to be a back door where people are able to be sent out to do other things that they've been called to do. And that's probably just like the elements of a healthy, small microchurch community. Those are the things we're becoming better at noticing commonalities, and that's why we can help and serve in that way. But even that, dude, none of it is mandated. It's still very light touch and very like, we offer like a portfolio of services, and you can take which ones you want.
Right. But what does it look like for a pastor or a leader to be a part of that? What's their role in that? Because the role in the typical prevailing model of the church is, okay, you're here to create a great weekend service, you're here to provide great teaching, make sure that worship team is put together and ready to go, and all those different things. And then you're managing a staff. But what are the leaders and pastors within Tampa Underground? What do they wake up thinking about?
Like not microchurch leaders, but like network leaders, like the people that help to run the platform.
Yeah, right.
I think our ethic has always been we serve the body of microchurches, the community of microchurches. So we really see ourselves as like an inverted triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And so our mandate is how healthy are they, or how well are they succeeding? How fruitful are they? That's our measurement of how well we're doing. So then we think about building platform. Essentially, it's two-sided marketplace.
Yeah. And when you say platform, we're not talking about stage.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean it in the terms of like network technology.
Yeah.
Where it's a two-sided marketplace where these people need these people, and you provide something to help them connect.
Well, when you say that, I immediately think of Ephesians 4, that what we commonly call fivefold: apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher, are there to equip, to resource, to give aid to. So you guys as leaders, when you wake up in the morning, you're not thinking, okay, what am I going to tell my staff they need to do today? You're waking up thinking, how can I serve the folks, right? How can I resource them?
I mean, the way we have done it that organizationally is we have departments, 6 departments, and then each of them have department heads, and they're thinking in a lane of like, so let's say media, they're thinking, how do we serve the microchurches? How do we give them what they need to succeed? So most small ministries wouldn't be able to pull off, a decent website or a logo or something. So there's a little team that just lives to do that for people.
Yeah.
And, or our finance team, which is like trying to just create low or no cost financial services for all these little startup things, startup ministries, So it's about, yes, it's 100% about serving that. Having said that, I do think there's an apostolic role for some people to have. And you do try to gather the network as much as possible, although that's almost impossible.
Herding cats, right?
Yeah. I did hear someone say recently, the way to herd cats is to tilt the floor. So I think, changing the whole paradigm is one way to move those. But I think you do want to get them together sometimes and then provide some kind of like heart-to-heart leadership. But I would say the primary thing you do in that role is tell people to keep going. So it's very different than if you have like a nominal audience that's like doing the very bare minimum, like, because that's the social contract with maybe a prevailing model is just come, sit quietly, nod when I say good things, and give us your money.
Yeah.
Right. And then leave quietly.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't say anything even. I mean, literally, don't say anything.
Unless it's amen to my great preaching.
Sure. But very, very small things. So that social contract, whatever it is, that church as spectacle or learned helplessness, essentially that's the deal that we set with people. And then we're surprised that they don't want to do stuff, or we're surprised it's hard to get them to be missional, right?
Yeah.
So
because we're changing the rules of the game, right? We're bait and switch.
So we asked you to just come and sit there and do nothing, but then it's like, why don't my people go out and do mission, or why aren't they more active in the church or something? And I don't think we mean that. I think it's unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It's like, how did we get here? But if you reverse that, if everybody in the audience is a missionary, then your thing is not to try to get them to do something. Like, please stop being lazy or something.
Right.
It's to actually say, God is pleased with you, and don't give up.
Yeah.
So a lot of that apostolic leadership, I think, when you have a network, a decentralized network of small churches, essentially, is to just tell their stories, celebrate them, serve them, and help them hold on to each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these things that God calls people into in mission, they'll take a lot from your life. They'll take a lot from your heart.
Sure.
These things are not easy.
Right.
And then you've taken away the glory of it. So there's also no, you're not going to get famous.
No.
Where are you going to be celebrated? Maybe never, maybe nowhere.
Yeah.
Of course, God sees that. And this is what breaks my heart about the narrative of the church as this sort of like power hungry, dominant leader.
Celebrity culture.
They're
all
there.
that.
But I also see the lion's share of people who would call themselves Christians, or even the lion's share of things that are churches, are actually quite humble, simple, and beautiful. And they're not perfect, and they're full of sinful, broken people.
Sure.
But they're trying, and I think on aggregate, if you look at all of that, you'd be kind of blown away by how extraordinary that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a huge point. The people of God are extraordinary. If they could just realize it. If we would just realize how gifted and how beautiful and what we have to give. I was struck. I remember the first time that I ever met you face to face. Gosh, man, it may have been 15 years ago. And then I remember just seeing all the microchurches represented in that building that you guys had, and it was all wrapped around passion and affinity that people had. That's where their mission was. And if you ask most Christians, do you have a passion for mission? They'd be like, okay. They'd be like, no, I don't want to go to Ghana, or I don't want to go. They're like, that's where their thinking immediately goes, rather than realizing, what about across the street, or what about your school, the places you live, work, hang out? And that mission is right under your nose, and passion is already within you, but we've so glamorized ministry, or we've compartmentalized it, and most people don't equate these things as calling in ministry. That's one of the big differences you guys have tapped into.
Yeah, I think it's what maybe Daniel Pink would call, the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivations are like, we're talking about the leader trying to convince people to come join the volunteer team or something
right.
like that. And it's extrinsic, so it's like, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it to be part of the group, or I'm doing it, and that wears off so fast.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't come from inside you, right?
Yeah.
But there are things that are intrinsic that you're going to wake up and you're just going to care about that. So if I have a child, let's say with autism, and I know how hard it is to be a parent of a kid with autism, and I know a bunch of other parents that are going through the same thing, you don't have to convince me every day to care about that, or to think that's something God wants to help people with.
Yeah, get involved in this community.
Help with people.
Right.
It's like, that's inside you. There's no way for you not to care. And to figure out what that thing is for each of us. I mean, what's interesting, if you look at, because we've had the privilege of watching so many hundreds of people discern their calling and then step into mission over the years, a lot of it, Lance, and I bet you know this, but a lot of it comes from their deepest pain. Like the worst things that have happened to them become somehow the thing they most want to give their lives to.
Yeah.
People that are either going, it's like cancer survivors. That's a group of people you don't want to be a part of. I mean, you do want to be a part of it if you get cancer. You prefer to live.
Right.
But it's such a horrendous journey to get to become a survivor.
Yeah.
But once you do, you're somebody with a certain credibility that can talk to people that have a cancer diagnosis.
Right.
If you have never had a cancer diagnosis, you kind of can't.
Absolutely.
In the same way.
No.
So that initiates you into a whole field, to use that word, like missionary word, that this whole field of ministry, or missionary work, which is like, now you're credible to do. If you've been harmed in some way, if you've lost something, that sometimes those areas of deep brokenness or pain are the place God actually calls us, sends us back into.
Yeah, these are places of liminality, right? That we talk about, that you go into an adapt or die scenario, and then, like you said, it puts you into a club that you didn't want to get into, but once you were there in your situation, you were glad that there was other flesh and blood around you.
Yeah. And you realize God is there.
Yeah.
And actually, there's in that darkness, there's hope and there's light. And so you think, I should go back in there, and I can go back in there. And so that's why a lot of microchurches to us, they're not necessarily just house churches or some sort of like cells, like that. That terminology was never satisfying really to us, because that's sort of like replicating the same thing over and over again. And I think that the sort of mosaic or the art of a real powerful microchurch network is just things that almost don't look anything like each other, except that they're small and they're empowered by God, they're led by ordinary people, and they're some expression of the church which is not conventional,
right,
which doesn't necessarily have a building or
exactly. So when people ask you, and I know you get this question asked a lot too, so when somebody says, so I'm just going to set this up and then let you respond the way that you would. Okay. Also, microchurch. Oh, that's house church, right?
I think the harder one is when people say, "Oh, it's just like a small group."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And I think some small groups in churches, if they have a missional component, I would say that actually is a church too. That's a little microchurch. But the downside of our kind of small group ministry curriculum or literature over the past 30, 40 years is that it took mission out. So it left mission with the big church, the big ship, and it just turned community. Like, we just need to know each other. Because if you come into a building with 1,000 people, you're maybe not talking to people, you're anonymous. And intrinsically, the leaders of those things know that people aren't going to know each other. So let's put them in small groups and homes or something like that. But to me, the irony of that is those things really struggle to maintain over time. They degrade fast. Because without mission, without that component of driving us towards something outside of ourselves, we turn on each other. It's like scrutiny is not good for human relationships.
So true. So true.
Like the heart, if all we have is to look at each other, we're going to pick on each other.
That's right.
Find flaws in each other. But if we have this other thing that you care about, I care about, and it's actually more important than our slight differences or our flaws, because we have them. I think because that you call that co-belligerence or whatever, we both want to fight that good fight or to go solve that problem, bring light into that darkness, and that's way more important than our little petty differences that helps community.
Sure.
The irony is that the missional component gives you deeper community.
Right. So talk a little bit about, Brian, the discipleship, the disciple-making factor and aim within microchurch.
Well, again, I want to...
For you guys. Anyway.
I want to say, I think each microchurch has to figure out its own discipleship path. So I think they are different. If you're working with teens in prison, that's going to be a different discipleship pathway, than a microchurch of doctors in residency or something like that. Their time, their education, the limits of being
accessibility, accessibility,
and what is the pathway for discipleship. But I think on all of them, there's a common thing of apprenticeship or letting people lead. Letting people learn to lead by doing it, or whatever the mission is, giving the mission into the hands of neophytes, of the newbies, and let them try. And because we're so, empowered as a kind of a principle, organizing principle, that everyone is empowered or everyone has power. Use it wherever you feel you should. That's got to also trickle down to the younger people in your community. And so saying look, what we do, you can learn to do it by doing it with us. And then also eventually you can do it on your own, and you could start a different version of this somewhere else. Or here's the even more likely thing, is that you raise up a bunch of kids, let's say in a juvenile detention center ministry or whatever, and when they get out, they're not all called to do juvenile detention center ministry.
Sure.
They're called to every kind of thing you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so letting them go.
Yeah. Release, let go.
Seeing these little microchurches grow by sending. So you may stay 20 people for 10 years, but you're growing because you've sent 20 new microchurches have been planted out of your little thing. So that's growth too.
What has been some of the most fulfilling aspects? I mean, you've been doing this a long time. And so when you do, at some points, lay down, go to bed, or just sit back and have a cup of coffee and just reflect, what's your joy moments of like, man, I feel really good about this or that?
First and most frequently is just watching other people flourish, like watching their ministry or their thing that they started, that you played some small part in incubating, just become awesome. And for them to get some kind of, like an article written about them in the newspaper, or they win an award, or somebody tells you on the side, like, oh, this ministry is like the premier. And this happens to me all the time now, because I'm so many years removed from like direct leadership, and because I'm more of a city leader now, working with a foundation and lots of other stuff. So I get in these rooms where people are talking about a ministry, like, this is sort of like best in class in our city. And I just remember that it was incubated in the underground.
Yeah.
And that's like the greatest joy.
Yeah.
And the second thing is a little bit like it, in the sense that, like, I was at an underground, I forget what they call it, we had a missionary training school or something like that. And I don't do much teaching and stuff like that in those things. But somebody was unavailable, so they asked me to fill in for a session or something. So I came, and I was sitting in the back, and I was next up, to teach that section. And a bunch of the people that were there were like, "Hey, who are you?" Like, they had no idea who I was, and they'd come in from other cities.
And boy, that offended you, didn't that hurt your feelings?
Upset. It's the best thing. And, and to be able to say, "Oh, I'm Brian. I'm part of the community here," and oh yeah, that's cool. Tell me about your story. And just, they'd never heard of me, never seen.
I mean, that's a win in your book, right?
Not just a win. It's like, I don't know. There's something. The older I get, Lance, maybe you agree with this, but the older I get, the more I want to kind of be obscured or something.
Yeah.
I feel shy.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Are not going to.
Yeah.
Like, do you?
I totally identify with that. I completely know what
but
you
it's
mean.
not just like, I don't want to be in the picture, but to watch other people shine. Or to watch
I mean, like I had a buddy just the other day. He pulls his phone out and he's like, "Hey, take a look at this." Well, it's his grandson doing a long jump, won a track meet at the long jump, and he was like, he wasn't showing me pictures of himself back when he was, look back at.
How weird would that be?
It would be so weird and wacko. But he was just gleaming.
Of me last week talking.
All right, I was good. I was hitting home runs when I was 17 at Keller High School, So, but you are totally more excited.
Yeah.
And that's where we should be. That's where the joy.
It's probably a little bit of phase of life thing.
It is. It's a stage,
but it's also, it is resonant. It's consistent with the thing we've set up, which is like, we always wanted to see people flourish and thrive and chase their thing, and actually watch them reach the world. Watch them bring light into dark places. So it was always going to be one step removed. That kind of platform building is always about somebody else succeeds, somebody else thrives, somebody else is celebrated. And when that happens, and this, you asked the question about what kind of leaders, or what does leadership look like over things like that, or for things like that, I think you have to really enjoy that process.
Yeah.
Watching the people you've loved or served or invested in get the credit.
Yeah.
Get the glory. I mean, it's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not wired for that. I just want to go on record here. I'm just as egotistical. I'm just as broken. I'm just as proud. More, probably. But it is interesting how you can take someone like me, who easily could be the worst kind of leader, like from 19-year-old me, and go, okay, but if we can just take a different journey, a different pathway, and Jesus is a part of that, and sanctification is a part of that, and failure. But it's like a safer route that we go on. Yeah. And so one of the gifts of the underground has not just been a gift to the microchurches, the 1,000 microchurches we've launched or incubated, but to me, to I think, the people who've worked for the underground, with the underground. It's just like, it gives us a healthier thing, not just something you're proud of that you were a part of for however long you were a part of it, but something that you feel comfortable with yourself at the end of a 10-year stint or a career in doing that, where you feel that it means something to see other people.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'd say that's like the 21st century success story is about other people.
Yeah.
We see that in all kinds of, like, obviously the technology of platforming and even just the idea of abundance and shared economies and
the creator economy, all that.
And just the value of networks is to watch other people succeed, to build something or create something that allows other people to do what they're supposed to do, or to be who they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then to take great joy in that, to be like, what is my widget? My widget is the success.
Yeah, and you can't have a scarcity mentality and embrace that.
And it can't be about control. It's got to be ultimately about creativity or releasing something or watching people.
Which really does demand a different system of leadership. Right?
And a different heart.
Yeah.
Because you've got to enjoy that, or you've got to feel rewarded by that. Somehow.
Yes, right.
So if you need that stroke of your ego, you're not going to get it. In fact, I've sometimes said, talking to church planners, like, if you had to decide right now, or if you were given the choice between, I'll give you 1,000 people who will come every Sunday to your church. And when you're just starting out, that sounds amazing.
Right.
Again, 1,000 people will come every Sunday to your church. They'll listen to you. They'll really like you. They'll support you. They'll give money to your church. But you'll never have more than 100 of those people engaged in mission. That's option one. Or I'm giving you option two, and you have to pick one. You can't have both. You can't have a hybrid, Or option two, right now, I will give you 1,000 people engaged in mission, but you'll never be able to get more than 100 of them in a row at the same time. Which would you choose? And of course, the right answer.
Yeah, everybody knows the right answer.
The right answer is number two. But if we're honest,
what's the honest answer?
The honest answer is it'd be really hard to let go of that first option. It'd be really hard to be like, okay, but that means you're telling me for the rest of my career I'll never speak to more than 100 people. I'll never feel that sense of
adrenaline, all that.
Sense of like I'm important. Or listen to more than 100 people in a room.
Right.
But you'll be allowed to be a part of something which is releasing 1,000 people in a mission.
Yeah.
And that's about what motivates you. That's about what your own sense of inner reward. Yeah. Because if you think, well, to watch those 900 or 1,000 people do amazing things for God, does that fill you? Yeah. And compare that to say what you feel like on a Sunday. I mean, you've spoken to large audiences. Yeah. I've spoken to large audiences. Yeah. It's pretty empty. Like, it doesn't like, do much.
I thought it was really going to be a lot better. All right. And there's so much ambition towards that, in chasing after that. I remember one time, and you're a voracious reader. That's an understatement. So Bobby Clinton, the old Fuller prophet. Some people know him as Robert Clinton, right?
His nom de plume, his book name is Robert.
Yeah, right. But for those of us that were students of Bobby, he's Bobby, and so he was great. He was the consummate guy on mentoring and leadership development. He had the leadership development theory and leadership emergence theory and all that. So years and years ago, because I had been one of his students, I was working with a friend putting a conference together. And so it was really centering on mentoring. That was really the main subject of this thing. And so we were talking about who we'll invite to speak at this. Well, in just a few days, I was going to be out in Pasadena. I was going to be at Fuller. And actually, I was going to have breakfast with Bobby. And so I told my buddy, I said, well, man, let's get Bobby. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, I'm going to be with him next week. Maybe he'll say yes. So I never forget, we're riding along, and so I tell him about this conference, and he's sitting over in the passenger seat. I mean, we're going to have, 800-900 people. And Bobby, look, we'd love to have you come be one of our main stage speakers and everything. So I told my buddy you'd probably do it. Bobby immediately goes, nah, I won't do that.
You're like, wait,
What? And he goes,
You don't want to hit?
exactly. And we'll give you a nice honorarium and everything. He goes, no, I won't do. I mean, he's probably pushing 70 at this point. But it probably would have been his answer at 50 too.
Right.
Just because of the way he was. So he goes, no, I won't do that. He says, I've really found there's more fruit by the 10 to 12 people I'm mentoring at any given time. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, and I guarantee you there was more fruit than doing that 45, 30-minute talk that everybody goes, oh, that was great. And by the time they're at dinner that night, they don't remember 3 points of it. It's value of that.
Did you ever read much about Henry Nouwen's inner struggle with like public speaking? So like he would. I mean, of course, he was such a open, vulnerable person before people were open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Before it was cool.
Right. Before it became an industry.
Before it was just awkward when he did.
Yeah.
But he would talk about just being completely falling apart because he would speak to an audience of thousands and no one would invite him to dinner.
Oh.
And he would go back to his room and just weep and weep and weep in deep loneliness.
That's so sad.
So sad. He was one of these people that believed in like hugging ministries or whatever. Like just he would actually have a therapist.
Wanted to hold people. Yeah.
Like that thing because he was so lonely and broken. So there's this public figure who's full of charisma, who people love. I mean, they'd listen to him and everyone, all these people would walk out and be like, oh, I heard Henry Nouwen and he changed my life.
Right.
But no one invited me to dinner. And then that darkness of feeling like I'm actually totally unloved and the incredible juxtaposition of those two emotions, which I imagine people that do a lot of public speaking will wrestle with. Maybe they can't totally put their finger on it.
Right.
But that sense of like being like the high of being beloved by all these people. They're totally focused on you, totally interested in you. And then you leave the stage and they're not at all. You're not important at all.
Right.
Which could be part of why it drives us to act weird, as leaders that you're getting that hit every week. Yeah. And then you need people to like pay more attention to you or feed that during the week when you're not.
Yeah, so true. Well, it's like you go to a restaurant, you love the meal, but that doesn't mean you want to.
You don't live there.
You don't want to hang. Yeah, you don't live there, and that doesn't mean you want to hang out with the chef necessarily, right?
But that's commodification then. Because
it's completely it's consumerism. Absolutely, it's.
Which, for that matter, you might as well just look at a screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and is that not kind of what's happening?
That's also happening.
I mean, I was talking with a friend yesterday that pastors a fairly large church, and we've all heard these stories, but he said after COVID, like only half the people returned. And he says because, they found out, man, it's a little more convenient just to wake up and have pancakes and look at a screen.
You guys did a really good job with this live stream thing.
I think you got this down. Yeah, and wow, right? Yeah. So... very interesting. Well, hey, Brian, man, I hope we can do this again, brother.
Sure.
My friend, I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to The Roy's Report, a podcast dedicated to reporting the truth and restoring the church. And just a quick reminder that we are listener-supported, meaning we don't have advertisers or major grants. We have you. So if you believe in what we're doing, would you please consider donating to The Roy's Report? To do so, just go to JulieRoy, spelled ROYS.com/donate. Also, just a quick reminder to subscribe to The Roy's Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. That way, you won't miss any of these episodes. And while you're at it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word about the podcast by leaving a review. And then, please share the podcast on social media so more people can hear about this great content. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you were blessed and encouraged.